Vice President Kamala Harris defended herself against charges of flip-flopping in her first interview since President Biden dropped out of the race. She spoke with CNN, along with her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
The pair covered issues including the economy, illegal immigration, and Israel. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story.
In her first sit-down interview since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris tried to defuse charges of flip-flopping by saying her values remain the same.
I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed.
Harris asked to explain how her views have shifted on key issues since she first ran for the White House in 2019. On illegal immigration, she says she no longer thinks the border should be decriminalized.
During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work.
Harris also defended Bidenomics, despite high inflation in the last 3 years, claiming successes on issues like bringing down prescription medication costs and improving supply chains. On the issue of fracking for oil, critical to voters in the key swing state of Pennsylvania.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
However, a CNN fact check showed that Harris never stated her own position on fracking in that 2020 debate. She simply said that Joe Biden wouldn't ban it. On foreign policy, Harris again said she supports Israel, saying they have to get a deal done to end the war in Gaza, while also supporting a Palestinian state.
I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure and in equal measure the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
But a former George W. Bush White House press secretary responded online. How can Kamala say her position on Israel won't change when she's changed her position on virtually every stand she's already taken? I will never trust her to stand by Israel. She'll collapse under the left-wing pressure in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, on the stump in Michigan, former President Trump made headlines of his own. On the issue of abortion, Trump saying he thinks a 6-week ban is too short, and vowing that his administration would ensure IVF treatments are more easily accessible.
Under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely.
And there are now just over 2 months until Election Day. And in 11 days, Trump and Harris will go toe-to-toe in their first debate. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News chief political analyst, David Brody, is with us. So, David, what's your take on the interview? Did the vice president help or hurt herself?
I mean, I thought it was pretty much a stalemate. What I mean by that is I don't think she moved the needle either way. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Gordon. There were a lot of softball questions. She didn't do anything to hurt herself. She didn't have any sort of major, error, if you will. But once again, she wasn't asked tough questions. I mean, it was kind of, I'll be honest with you, it was kind of like grilled chicken and broccoli. I just like, no sauce, no salt. And I don't think it moved the needle either way. And that's kind of where I see it.
Well, isn't that ultimately a win for her? The charge has been she's been ducking the interviews, and that she doesn't want to go off any kind of script. She wants to stay on focus, on message all the way to the November election. And just by showing up and doing an interview, isn't that a win for her?
Well, that's right. I mean, if the bar is she checked the check the list, if you will, or put a check mark on the list, sure, then it's a win for her. We'll see what it means in the polls, and we'll also see whether or not she does another interview. I don't expect another one to be done before September 10th for sure, but afterwards, you never know. That specifically could be an issue for sure.
All right, well, I pay attention when politicians repeat things, and it seems like a definite talking point for her. My values haven't changed. She repeated that phrase, I think, at least 3 times, maybe more. Is that a signal to Democrats back in San Francisco that she's still the same and she's tacking to more moderate positions for the election?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's exactly what it is, Gordon. And if you think about those values haven't changed, but her positions have, and take fracking, for example. I mean, she says her value hasn't changed, but what is the value behind fracking, right? The idea is liberals believe that it causes environmental damage. Well, she clearly believes that. I mean, she's staked out that position and that value for a very long time. So if now she is for fracking, how do you square the position changing but the value not changing? It's that type of stuff that just has very much consultant written all over. And quite frankly, Gordon, this interview, if anything, was just a track to the middle. That's what she's trying to do. She's trying to win a presidential election. And so she's going to be for fracking. And now she's no longer for decriminalizing the border, which she was for in 2019. She's not for that anymore. Now she wants to be the prosecutor of prosecutors of everybody coming across the border. Look, I mean, and there's other things as well. She is definitely tracking to the middle. You wonder at one point, is she going to put on a MAGA hat and say, drill, baby, drill? I mean, at this point, that's where we're heading, Gordon.
Well, she's putting on a MAGA hat to say, let's build a wall. It's like she's taking pages from the Trump campaign and Trump positions. Back in 2019, she was actively campaigning against that. Biden made it a signature of his campaign and then the signature of his first 3 years in office. Now they're waking up to, well, 9 million people flooding across the border isn't really a good idea. And so they're trying to I guess, track back. But it's just amazing to me that she can raise her hand in a debate in 2019 and say, I'm for decriminalizing the border, which essentially says there's no such thing anymore as illegal immigration, which is, I found the position at the time astounding. How does she reconcile? I don't understand why she's not being called on it.
Well, and that kind of goes to the softball nature of the interview. Where was the follow-up exactly? Some of what we're doing here. And speaking of follow-ups, what about when she being Dana Bash, asked Kamala Harris about Joe Biden and about his mental acuity? She didn't say it that way, but she asked Kamala Harris about that situation. Where was the tough question about what did you know and when did you know it? In terms of his slide into obviously mental acuity issues. There was none of that, Gordon. And quite frankly, the interview seemed a little jarring from a visual standpoint, more than a little. I mean, you had Tim Walz there who spoke for about 4 minutes of the 26-minute interview, which kind of was strange. Why was he even there to begin with? It just seemed like he was a third wheel there. But then he was a very large third wheel. I mean, if you noticed in the visuals there, he's like above both Kamala Harris, who's the presidential nominee, and Dana Bash, but it looked like Kamala Harris was in some sort of deposition. And the lighting wasn't flattering. The whole thing just visually did not look good. And that's a problem with the campaign staff for putting her in that situation.
Well, I think she wanted him there, and otherwise he wouldn't have been there. So how do you think he came across, and what do you make of his attempt to blame his misstatement on his military service to grammar?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's buying that. But at the same time, the good news for the campaign is I'm not quite sure anybody's really voting, because Tim Walz had a few lies, or he calls it bad grammar or misstatements. You call it whatever you want based on your philosophical views. But I don't think anybody's voting for this ticket because of Tim Walz's past inactions or actions. I think this is all about Kamala Harris and defining the narrative on her. And as it relates to that, she tried to dial back that comrade Kamala mantra that's coming from the Trump campaign, in essence saying, no, she's going to be tough on this and, she's for fracking. The real question is, Gordon, are voters going to buy it? And honestly, in a truncated time space here, they may, based on the fact that there hasn't been the proper vetting in a presidential race that there normally should be.
Well, I think, judging from the polls, they're buying it by the truckload. I'm predicting that she can win. And if you look at the polls today in all those swing states, she's ahead. What's your take? How close is this race? Is it going to come down to the wire, or are we going to see Harris' momentum take her even further into victory?
Well, it's a very close race, but let's take the polls with a grain of salt, and here's why. If the polls are incorrect from their methodology standpoint, what do I mean by that? The polls are geared in a way to predict what the electorate is going to be. If the electorate is not that, then the polls will be off. And even if they're off by a percentage point or two, that'll make in this election a world of difference. So, for example, the Fox News poll had a lot of battleground state polls that show Kamala Harris ahead in places like Nevada and Georgia. Excuse me, not Georgia, but or a couple others, Michigan, things like
Wisconsin.
that. But if you look, Wisconsin. But if you look at the methodology of the Fox poll, they're predicting the electorate's going to be 53% women, 47% men. Well, in 2016, it was actually 52-48. In other words, 48% men, 52% women. Sorry to geek out, but the point is that if they're off by a percentage point or two, that makes all the difference in the world. So we have to take these polls with a grain of salt, and it also depends on how they're weighted. Look, bottom line is that it is a close race. It's all about energizing the base. And it's interesting because Kamala Harris wants to play to the middle a little bit. That could actually end up backfiring on her to a degree, because I'm not quite sure how many folks in the middle are quite there for the taking. But the good news for her is that she can go to the middle a little bit because her leftist base won't leave her. And the reason they won't leave her is because it's anybody but Trump. And they'll make sure that they'll come out and vote for her because they don't want to see Trump in the White House.
Well, she continues with "my values haven't changed." I think that's the messaging to the left, and they're just going to hold their breath and wait until after the election. How do you rate the campaigners right now? Who's doing a better job, Harris or Trump?
Well, there's no doubt Harris is doing a better job, and Donald Trump has just been way off message on abortion. And it's not even about off message. I mean, now it's gotten to the point where people are starting to question, I say people, talking about conservatives, specifically pro-life conservatives, wondering, what's up with this? Is this just a campaign strategy to attract to the middle? But this has been so many different faux pas on abortion. I mean, calling for him being a champion of reproductive rights, and now he's for IVF funding at the federal level. He's against a federal abortion ban. The RNC platform was dialed back on the pro-life language, and there's more. The Florida abortion amendment that he just weighed in on in the last 24 hours, saying, giving the suggestion that he might actually vote yes on that, which is a problem for pro-lifers. Look, the list is long. So he is not on message at all when it comes to that. And now the campaign may say, well, you know what? We're tracking to the middle, and we think that's where we need to be because abortion's a political loser for us. Fine, you can have that strategy. That may work for you. The problem is you got pro-life Catholics in Pennsylvania and some of those Rust Belt states and all over the country, not to mention evangelicals overall. And though evangelicals are not single-issue voters, it could suppress turnout a little bit if people are just like, you know what, he's not the 2016 candidate anymore. He just feels a little bit different, especially on the abortion issue. And I might just maybe sit home or not bring 10 friends. I might bring 2, and that could be the difference.
Well, it's almost like a football game. The momentum has definitely shifted, and with that, it's a very short time. There's just 2 months, and we'll see how it turns out. Well, David, you're going to have a very busy 2 months, and thanks again for the insights.
You bet.